Thank you very much. It's really great opportunity. I know I was supposed to be there um, to give this in person, but I think it might be actually, believe it or not, better because maybe more people can join and less trouble for all of us. Hopefully, this will be as effective as we would have wanted it otherwise. I thank Rahul. We met a couple years ago, and they've been watching this activity of Citizen Foundation. It's been wonderful to talks many times, wonderful talks, and it looks like it's working out the kind of discourse you want to have, particularly about Indian ancient as well as modern issues as they relate to the world. And hopefully, my presentation will shed some more light towards your goal. NRI means non-resident Indians, which basically in philosophical terms, it means um, you're not in your area of comfort. You have gotten out of your comfort zone, and in India की हमारी भाषा में वहाँ पे अभी हम थोड़ा सा हमारा गांव का परिचय दीपिका जी ने नहीं बोला कि मैं गांव का भी मेरा परिवार जो है वहाँ पे गांव में रहता है और अयोध्या के पास और अभी मैं जाता हूँ तो लगभग 90% टाइम मैं अपने गांव पहुँच पाता हूँ और उससे मुझे बड़ी प्रेरणा मिलती है और वहाँ की भाषा में अभी आप क्योंकि कोरोना की वजह से बहुत सारी माइग्रेंट वर्कर्स और तरह तरह की चीजें लोग बोल रहे हैं वहाँ पे जब लोग कोई अपना गांव छोड़ के जाते हैं अपने क्षेत्र को छोड़ के जाते हैं तो उनको कहा जाता है वो परदेश जा रहे हैं जबकि मालूम है कि देश तो एक ही है लेकिन चूंकि अपना एरिया छोड़ के जब जाते हैं उसको परदेश कहते हैं तो क्योंकि वो व्यक्ति एक दूसरी माहौल में जाता है और वहाँ पे is able to see things differently and not only what the person is but also what the person looks back at oneself because you start seeing many things. I had when I traveled first time to Delhi, I had this experience, and a lot of things actually still are very fresh in my mind. And the same thing happened when I left India 37 years ago and now live in the United States. Um, and in various parts of the United States, and my own stages of life changes, experience changes, these things. Of course, there is a NRI Day in India that was started by the Prime Minister of India when Atal Bihari Ji was Atal Bihari Vajpayee Ji was the Prime Minister, and that is celebrated on around the days that Mahatma Gandhi came in January. January 9th was his return, and so it's around that time NRI Day is celebrated. The more intriguing question is whether Ram and Krishna also can be considered NRIs. So if you look at my my initial definition of NRI means Pardes, which means you leave your area of residence and a comfort zone, philosophically speaking, then you are an NRI. So in that sense, Sri Ram left Ayodhya and through various travels and travails, he ended up in Sri Lanka at one time, and the story is known to everybody. And I consider him an NRI because he described Ayodhya when he was in Sri Lanka, and he called Janani Janmabhumisi Swargadapi Jariyasi. So that is that the mother and the motherland is better than the people might call Swarg or heavens. And Krishna's story is different. He was detached very much from the very beginning, and he left many places. He left place of his birth to go to Ayodhya, Yashoda and Nanda Baba in when he was born in Mathura, and he went to Gokul. But then he also again traveled back to Mathura. Then from Mathura he traveled back to his Gurukul, where he studied, and then from there, when he started actually being in Mathura, and he was never a king, of course, but he eventually moved to Dwarika, and from Dwarika, this important thing is that he still looked at Mathura as an important area of his work. Again, it's not the time or place to talk about details about that, but the point is that when he was outside of his initial residence, he worked from there for that land, and in various ways. His perspective was a little bit different than Ram's perspective, but nevertheless, they both worked for the same land, and Gandhi did the same thing. And several times, I've traveled from my village to my bazaar, which was only a mile away when I went sixth grade, and that looked like I was really, the same experience as I went to America. And from my marketplace, middle school to high school, that was district place. It was a major shift in my life, and a lot of my experiences come from there. And then from, of course, district place to Delhi, and from Delhi to United States. So this is, I have gone through several steps of being virtually an NRI, and so many of my ideas are from there. And what I want to emphasize here is a topographical visualization of what we might call something that you see far away, far sight. You see how your sight is when you see this is moon. Beautiful, isn't it? When you look at from there, and actually this is a view of Earth from the moon. And as you can see, the moon is really not that beautiful when you really look at very close up. And of course, this is the moon landing, and then the view of Earth from moon. It looks beautiful either way. Depends on when you start seeing things far. This happens. This is the view of Earth as if it's changing these phases again from moon. So I want to make some points out of it. One is the farsightedness is, of course, generally is viewed in English as something that you see far away, to be able to forecast, foresee things, and, with your wisdom and experience and other things. But then other one which I want to emphasize here is from far also. The farsightedness from far. So I'm trying to emphasize from where I am. I'm far from the motherland, the place I was born and I grew up, and the way that I think they see India. And one of the things I want to let out early on, many intellectuals, civilizations from thousands of years and to modern time also consider India to be the motherland. Population genetics also says most of the world is come through India. They may have started in Africa, but they have come through India, the language and everything. So in a very figuratively way, we are everybody looking at India from far away. And that is the emphasis I wanted to make. Normally people think farsightedness means what you see in the future, but I'm saying here from a distance. So nearsighted is normally rough and tough. And an example would be the same moon that looks beautiful. Actually, this is in Smithsonian. I visited there. And look at that, just a piece of stone, very rough, in India, particularly, I think the rest of the world also, there is a saying, खास करके किसी की सुंदरता को लोग इस तरह से they try to explain, कवि लोग अपनी कविताओं में लिखते हैं कि चांद जैसा किसी का मुखड़ा होता है. And if you actually literally had this experience, because I went with my family and I told my wife that if I said that your face is like this, I don't think you will be very pleased. So it's very important, the beauty and the thing that we see from far away is there is some grain of fact checks in there, what we are making it, what we look at it. So there is one way is when you are far away, I'm not seeing all the problems or whatever that thing is locally happening, and which is obviously rough and tough. And also then consequently people are not able to see it as beautiful as other people are able to see. The other far-sighted is of course beautiful. The other thing is also it's very important to see it's more complete, because when you are very close, then it's very difficult to see everything. But if you are far away, you can have that view which is more complete. And finally, it also is not only complete, but it is in the context of others, which is where our perspective again. I'm seeing the rest of the world and how they see India and how I see India and how I can go back and forth. So I have, I'm just trying to explain why I have worked in this area and how I look at things a little bit differently, sometimes not necessarily in congruence with people who are otherwise very knowledgeable and scholars and practitioners and other things. So sometimes we have some differences, and the differences are only from this perspective. So now Indian system that we have been talking about, and many of us obviously know very well, now how that is looked at from the faraway place, other than people like me who may be having experience. So as an example, this is the news of May 12th, 2020. Yoga, that has been considered internationally, is very helpful. Science as well as health professionals have certainly given a thumbs up to this, but then there are problems. The 105 pastors wrote to the Ohio schools, and they succeeded stopping yoga. And there is this is very important to understand how the world operates. So they call here the endorsement of yoga is violation of First Amendment's Establishment Clause. This is First Amendment of the American Constitution, which forbids government from picking a religious winners and losers and enforcing its choice. And Holy Hell, they finally get it. This is the article saying. But then the next sentence says, without question, Eastern religion is a practice in conflict with the vast majority of those in our region. Again, talking about this, whether from Judeo-Christian traditions or otherwise. So this is constitutional thing that being used, enforced according to law, and that has been actually taken to courts in the past in this country, and that courts say that, in 1995, for example, U.S. Court of Appeals talks about Self-Realization Fellowship, which is Paramhans Yoganand's organization, that Hindu yoga spiritual tradition as a religious tradition is what described as a religious tradition. And even TM of Mahesh Yogi is also considered as a religion. And so if you combine these two, then there is a very different look at what yoga might be and what yoga might be perceived by some others. But when it comes to the institutions, this is what happens. So I now want to go back to this slide. Now, if that is the case, then look at some of the Christian ideas, which is, we need to see whether that is how is that being taken care. So according to the Bible, Genesis, the God said, let there be light, and there was light. And that was the first day. That's why it is called as Sunday or Ravivar. Ravivar is, you wouldn't find this actually in ancient India. This is a new adaptation in India from whatever I have been able to check. Now, second day is also God called the dome sky, and there was evening and there was morning, and that's the second day. Because actually there is it talks about the water being divided between earth and heaven, which actually, believe it or not, has an effect because of moon. So that's why they call it Monday. And I wouldn't go through all of it. If you're interested, you can find it on internet. And then earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed. It's all good stuff that normally as a scientist I will accept. That's I'm sure the vegetation came, and then the animals came, and so on and so forth. But
the important thing is that how it was described in a religious book. So the third day, and then there is the sixth day. I skipped the fourth and fifth day, where God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. And the seventh day, God finished the work, and He had done, and He rested on the seventh day. That is the concept of weekend. Now, there is no other reality anywhere in any astronomy, astrology, or any of any kind, that you divide the days or the years in weeks, other than this. And this is just a religious concept. This is totally religious concept. It comes from Bible. So why not somebody question that? Because there is obviously and not only, of course, America, the rest of the world is. India also believes in it. They practice this, and that will be the true question of whenever you selectively applying certain ideas, for example, to yoga and calling it religion. Then here is totally religion. You're following the weeks. There is no reason to follow the weeks. There is no reason to actually follow any of this other than something natural, which happens perhaps in India. I talked about the moon, and the moon phases are, when my mother, who was illiterate, she could see moon and tell which tithi is that. Actually, she was so good, and my daughter recently confirmed here, when my mother was here for some time, a few months, and my daughter, oldest one, had tested her when she said, I can tell you the what is time right now looking at the sun. And my daughter recently told me that she was correct within 5 minutes, within 5 minutes of space. So natural living is better. So why have this artificial idea? And once you accept this artificial idea, which is what I'm trying to emphasize here, once you have an idea, a framework has been accepted, then there is no way, no matter how much you try to do. I mean, of course, Indians have already made it Ravivar, Somvar, Mangalvar, Budhvar. This is just a compliance. This is not a originality. There is nothing original in there. It's just Indians have, and this may be the cause of what Indians have done. And this is where maybe NRI view, which is from far away, may have some value. And so I want to go to another concept, which is the concept of trilogy or trinity. They use both of them in the Western world. And then they have the God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. These are the trilogies that, we know what God is an invisible, but the Father is visible, at least to the Son. And the Holy Spirit goes to the Father, or conveys to the Father, only through the Son or the prophet. That's the concept. There are, the only reason I wrote this book, put this book here, Knowing God, is that people have been written, right? I don't even know, I haven't read this book. It just talks about the trilogy and then knowing Jesus, God, the Father, and the Holy Spirit through the Old Testament. Somebody had described that. Similar thing is, of course, in India. There is a Trinity. And this Trinity concept is, of course, the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. And it's very important that Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh also have something that is invisible, which is the Sesnag. Nag means Sakti, and Ses means left, whatever is left. And those of us who may have paid attention to two things, one is the physical world is only 10% visible. 90% is dark energy. Also, it so happens that our brain, only 10% is active. The 90% of the brain, we don't know what it does. So but here is the concept which is maybe equivalent in some sense. There is a Trinity, but here the ideas are very different. Of course, there is a creator, there is a destroyer, and there is a preserver. This is a kind of simple way. But if and then, again, I don't mean to promote the Hindu Trinity book of Devdutt Patnaik. Actually, there is a lot of controversy about his book and his explanations. But I just wanted to just show equivalent that people are doing this kind of studies. But the real philosophical meaning of this Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and of course, origin of that also, there is a story behind that, which really is a story of a Shakti, or it's called Adya. which is a woman, feminine form of Shakti that creates these. But I wouldn't go into detail of that, but only want to tell that in these, the philosophical concept of that is that the Vishnu is the Lord of the causal world, and then Brahma is the Lord of the subtle world where the creativity occurs, and Shiva is the not a destroyer, but he's the Lord of the physical world, or sthul jagat jisko bolte hain. And there things get born, and of course anything that gets born gets destroyed. It has nothing to do with he is the destroyer, but he presides over that. And all these, the causal, the subtle, and the physical is in us, in each one of us. And so we have direct connection to all these things exist within us. And that's this direct connection versus apparently what the way it is practiced is through the Holy Spirit, by the way, is, if you really read more and learn more about it, it means it's the most powerful, and it will reflect, it gives power to everything else. So what I'm going to do now is try to compare this system to the system that we have for governance in India and in the whole world, in the name of democracy, is that these three branches are there: the executive and judicial and legislative. The part of the legislative is representatives, which means people, and judicial is only interpretation of that representation for the executive. So it actually, people are missing in this governance, believe it or not. Then everything has been just delegated. So you have legislatures who are supposed to be getting power for the people. Of course, everything else, executive gets power from the people, and judiciary gets power from the people. So it's equivalent to people. And in the Western world, the Holy Spirit is supposed to be the most powerful, and gives power to the Son and the Father. And so this is reflected in their system of governance. And this is the system of governance we have adopted. And so there is no way you will be able to bring what we might call as the concepts of Ram, Krishna, and Gandhi. Now, we think we know about Ram, Krishna, but we probably not from this perspective. But Gandhi, and he was very much opposed to this system. And what he was proposing was called as Ram Raj. And he was talking about Gram Raj, so basically empowering the people and let people directly be responsible from that, because there is no question of delegation. And the delegation idea comes from this conceptual trilogy or trinity of the best, which they have been able to put in their system, and we have adopted. And then now we want to force fit this in there. It does not matter whether it's a Bhajpa or it's Congress or Communist or whosoever. As long as you have this system, you have to force fit it. And force fitting creates a lot of stress, a lot of inferiority feeling. And that is major cause, what I feel, of India was not able to get where it thinks it needs to get. All the efforts that Srijan Foundation is doing, all the effort maybe I am doing, or many of you who are in the audience, I know, of making our own efforts to bring the Vedic philosophy, and it is not getting there. And it is not getting there, in my opinion, is primarily this, because you have this whole calendar for it, that you have weekly, you have weekends, and you think that's really the best way to do things. I have a lot more opinion about these things. Obviously, I want to go ahead and say a few examples and discuss those things so that you can see my thoughts moving forward. But on this itself, how and why and where we need to do and who needs to do this is a humongous task. And fortunately, of course, Srijan Foundation took this step a few years ago, as we did here in the United States with Stalway Center for Indic Studies or various programs. World Association Vedic Studies was established in 1996, and many other efforts have been going on of different personalities, whether that's Paramhans Yogananda or Mahesh Yogi, they all brought all this. These efforts are going on, but ultimately it has been precipitated, Rahul Devanji, that even though I feel a little disappointed that I'm not there in person, but I also can tell you that this thing that is called coronavirus has brought a new perspective, new way of reflecting at ourselves, and so it makes better meaning today for what I wanted to say earlier. Now I think that would have been more skeptical than what I'm saying today. Hopefully you will see in a more positive light that this is something that we need to consider. So I already discussed this. Now I want to, this coronavirus thing, and you can see people here, it was unthinkable. You know, it was unthinkable. I visited India in February and I saw some people having a mask and it was looking like funny. But now actually it's the entire population, at least those who can afford. And once they venture out, they have to put this mask. And this kind of, you know, interesting, you know, that you see this, what happened, the Banar Sena also used to put masks. And I would like, I'm just curious, I don't know obviously, but I want to emphasize that Banar does not necessarily means Bandar or monkey. Banar means the people from Ban. And they may have been putting a mask because, you know, this is very common even today in America. They're mascots, which all of them are animals. And that doesn't mean they're really animals. You know, it's maybe 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years from now, people might actually think that they used to have animals roaming around their football field. But that's not the case. So this is kind of a eerie similarity that you see. And then, of course, you see this, where these are very powerful. So I'm afraid, and I do not want people to misread it, the corona has created Banar Sena, but in a very figurative way, it may have. And so the people who are joining hands together, thinking about it, reflecting back on them, everybody's working from home. Home is becoming very important. Everybody's going back to village is becoming very important. And so some of these ideas are more acceptable if we were to talk about them. And only in that sense, I'm trying to make this point. I did write a book from this perspective, basically collection of my thoughts on various issues over a period of time. And that book's name is A Different Take, an NRI view of India in the tradition of Ramakrishna and Gandhi. As you can see, I have put Ramakrishna and Gandhi right here on top. And of course, there are others, you know, Jayaprakash Narayan, Pandit Nehru, Ambedkar, Paramhans Yoganand, and of course, Swami Vivekanand. They're all the wisdom thoughts came only when they went outside, because they could look at themselves, their own, both in physical terms, in subtle sense, and also in the terms of the causal world, and depending on who was able to go how far. And so they were able to see the trinity of Indian ideas, and that's what they brought. I hope that this book sends some reflection on some of those thoughts. Not necessarily I have tried to write this as a history, but as a observation of what is happening and how we can look at those in a different way. And some of those ideas are the very highly quoted one from Mahapanishad that says, normally people know Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, we have the great idea of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but actually the whole slok is Ayam Bandhurayam Neti Ganana Lagchetasam Udara Charitanam Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It says Ayam Bandhurayam. You know, these are our brothers, and these are our, it's not only even, it's me versus others. Actually, in the Hitopadesh, it says, I am Nijah Paroveti, Garana Lagchetsam. You know, they had changed a little bit, which means me and others. So that has come down, and what you see today in the world, and what you see in the world when I say the world of village versus the world of cities, where everybody has become me and you. But in villages still is we. There are some references that in the villages, again, I'm coming from village, वहां पे हिंदी में बोलने पे आपको समझ में ज्यादा आएगा क्योंकि अंग्रेजी एक शब्द नहीं है उसके लिए. तो वहां पे अगर कोई आता है, रिश्तेदार भी आता है, आप हमारे मित्र हैं, अगर आप हमारे यहाँ आते हैं और आप कोई अच्छा सा खेत देखते हैं जिसमें गन्ने का खेत हो और देखें बहुत अच्छा है, किसका खेत है, तो ये कोई नहीं बोलता है कि मेरा है, वो सारे लोग ये बोलते हैं अपना है, अपने में आप भी आते हैं। ये हमारे यहाँ की ये इसकी ये आइडिया है कि इवन वी डू नॉट कॉल ओनली आवर ब्रदर्स सिस्टर्स, आवर sons and daughters, but we consider everybody to be apna, and that is the concept will not be done unless we go back to that kind of, at least darshanik roop se we have to go there, and then we have to see the practical of that. So that idea comes from, a practical idea is still comes from the village. Yeah, this is what I was saying. I am Nija Paroveti Garana Lagse, Sam Udar Charitanam. This is a different story, and this is very important to know who is saying this. In this story, it is said by the who wanted to eat the deer, Chitrangad. So when we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, who are we? Are we saying either a Chitrangad or the deer, or are we saying the jackal or the hyena? If you're saying Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and you are really a deer, then you're just going to be eaten up, and that's very important for us to know. So even our own ideas, like I said, this is all this thing is coming only because some of us see it from far away, and we see in the context of others how other people look at these things. Now, so I want to come to democracy, which is touted, of course, everywhere in the Western world, and is also lauded in India because the largest democracy in the world. The current democracy is, why not for us? Well, why is for others? They have literate populations educated, habits critical, which is very critical to democracy. I wouldn't go into detail, but Thomas Jefferson's idea that it is very important that people get educated. Educated means educated for their system. And there is a small populations with minimal linguistic diversity, relatively speaking, and they are comfortable standard of living and diminished status anxiety. They do not have that. Whereas what we have, a large amount of illiterate, educational system. And when I say illiterate, doesn't mean, illiterate doesn't mean that they're not wise. I'm just, the system that we have put in place, which is the Western system. Educational system geared towards creation of an obedient class. Get certificate, get some kind of job or service. Service is kind of nice way of saying that you are a slave. Huge linguistic ethnic diversity, and poverty creates a status anxiety and diminished mobility. And when you have the mobility of people like migrant workers, then eventually you see what happens to them. Nobody cares. So ultimately, the idea, if the world is being run by economic systems, and I just wanted to say a little bit about the economics, and because I will discuss this a little bit more in Indian context. And in that one, the word actually oikos was the basic unit of society in most Greek states, and it just basically means household, management of household. And that's why household is very important. One's house is very important. There are the Vedic views, and some of you are better scholars about these things than I am, is that you have to consider that the household as a unit. You have to consider village as a independent and with full power unit. That's it. That's all it needs to be done. So, of course, we have then free market economy, we have capitalist market economy, socialistic, communistic, and STEM economy, which is science, technology, and mathematics. That kind of technology which is based on today's world, that everything has to be done based on tech, and these are the ideas are being sold directly. Everybody has bought this idea. If you are educated in India, you must know about GDP and GNP and world population and whatever is happening in the world, technology and other things. That is what is sold to you. And I wouldn't go into detail of how the corporations really work on the brain, and that includes in social media, and how brain is fed to sustain their system. And the consequences that the planet is in big trouble. And again, this is not a point to describe it here, and just wanted to just demonstrate, show it that this is very very important. And we are in dire situation right now, as you can see in Delhi and all over the world, even right now, not only Corona, but whatever the different kind of cyclones or earthquakes are almost pervading everywhere. Even here, the weather has changed, weather pattern has changed significantly from last year. So the Gandhi's idea, Arthashastra is, it's translated, Arthashastra of Chanakya is translated science of politics, but clearly it's not like that. Gandhi's idea was limited industrialization, avoid machines, small scale, avoid laws. Just don't need to make laws, because there is a history of laws, why laws are made the way they are made and the way they are enforced. And you have to make organic production, limited consumption, and spiritual enlightenment was Gandhi's idea. These concepts to try some of my ideas that I have, again, mostly based on my experience and a little bit of reading. Distribution of not wealth, but wealthy. Distribute wealthy people so that they are directly in touch with people who need and whatever they want to do. You create a narrative from local perspective. Deshwasi versus citizen. I would like a PIL to be filed in the Indian Supreme Court, saying that who described everybody as citizen when people didn't live in the cities. Especially in 1947, 90% people lived in villages. Why not call everybody a Gamar or Dehati or something like that? I mean, they all have a lot of really great meaning. Where the Gamar words comes from Gaon, Gaon words come from Gram, Gram comes from Griham, Griham comes from something that involves everything. So this comes back to the economics. But citizen is not the way we have just accepted that. Same thing about education, local diversity and entrepreneurship. And, growth versus stable. Sanatan is stable. Whatever is Sanatan is, that's sustainable. So, and GDP versus consumption, need-based products, and discourage business of education, health, and food, and freedom of family. Family should be free, not, be the way the system is working, where nobody is free, and families are the one who suffer most. And so these are the universal values that independence, freedom, equality, satya and ahimsa as tools, and political values should be Ram Raj and Gram Raj, and personal values should be self-sacrifice. These are Gandhi's ideas after he has gone into the world. And then he wrote in his Hind Swaraj, many of you obviously know it very well. He's been very, very harsh on people in terms of education, in terms of lawyer, who himself was a lawyer. It says promoter of strife and enslavement of the nation. That's the lawyers, and those are the ones who are running. They are the one legislature and the judicial system that I was talking about. That is the prophets. They act as the prophets of God, which is the executive branch. So I'm again not going to go into too much details, except to just point out how my observation about villages is there is the least amount of bribe, least amount of black money, least amount of corruption, least amount of pollution, least amount of unsustainable behavior, least amount of dowry. Does, believe it or not, most people, educated people, think dowry does happen in villages. That's not. Least amount of, or almost nothing, no female feticide, and least the best gender ratio. And when the cold seat lahari jab aati hai, to jo people who die, they don't die in the villages, because villages people, they know each other and they take care of each other. So anything, if you really put this in any country, if it was a country, a village was a country, you would like to live there. And what we have right now is not the system that allows us to do that. And what we have a system is that we have divided people. This is just an example of Hindu, Muslim, and Christian. But so amount of resources you need in this to run the system is humongous. And there is so much opportunities of black money, corruption, bribe, all these things happens because we have divided. If you really keep going up, and eventually in आचरण से जो हम आचार की जो व्यवस्था है, उसके हिसाब से when we do things, then you need least resources, because people just see you. And something like Ram Raj idea came because Ram just did it. He just did it. What he believed in, he was the वो ऐसे व्यक्ति थे उन्होंने सत्य को सत्यापित किया. The truth was enforced and lived in his life. And that's why it is important. Now, the wealth of joint families, again, I would not go into details. it was something that Ramesh Diwan, Professor Ramesh Diwan in this country, had written a book and about this. And Gandhi, he was a Gandhian, and he talks about how the joint families can become a very big addition or support system for having the wealth. And wealth doesn't just mean only money. And in that one, material wealth versus relational wealth is what he talked about. And relational wealth was coined by Professor Ramesh Diwan, and he talks about underlying principle of love, caring, and sharing with others, intangible, and expression of spiritual living in the company of blood relations or friends, versus whatever you have seen. And today, believe it or not, no matter how much wealth somebody has, it's really ultimately you have gone back. Corona has reminded us we have gone back to the system of the relations, and going back to families. Nobody is camping out, staying in shelter in offices. Everybody going home, and the people who are from villages, they're going back to villages. I'm going to skip some of these discussions here. Only thing I want to say that this is a study that was published in 2003 in Nature that shows that the number of people per household is going down and number of household going up, which means exploitation of the nature. And that is not, this is something that was published in a book that I edited in 2011. Those of you who may be interested more, there are several good chapters that includes that some of the data that I talked about joint family. And the joint family is very important even in today's world, believe it or not. For medicine, elderly people, they have less dementia, they get better cure if they live in a joint family than compared to nuclear family. Some recipes about joint families. There is a obedience. It's in my family. We live. This is our family right now. Seventh generation living together. And my observations, these are really based on some of those things that I have studied about my own family. That you have to be entrepreneurial all the time, and you have to be making all the efforts. And then ultimately you need to do your duties and have a sense of your responsibility. And then, joint family, there's not an issue when you start thinking about me and mine, and then it becomes an issue. And there are so many other benefits. Communal living, this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam idea cannot be lived unless you live with others when you were a child. Because you learn to live with others without having any fear, without having any greed, without having any insecurity, without having any selfishness. Because you see everybody's working good. And that's why I think the system was there. And, this whole idea of once that normally people talk about, there is the idea of santan. Samyak tante sa santana. The one who continues the system is the one santan. Baki, otherwise, you have this putra, putri, tanay. Tanaya means body extension. Hriday means, by your feelings. And atmaja, of course, is ultimate. That means your atma. And then only somebody becomes uttaradhikari. So that's a very different system than what we have. I just want to say that system is not just because Balram Singh has some experience, or I've been looking at my ancient sages' ideas from far away and living in America and talking in English. That makes more effective. It's not because of that. It's science talking like that. Here is a paper that was published in 2014, where they talk about social environment has an effect on your gene expression and your health and behavior. So this is a great science. If you ever want to call social science as social science, I always had problem with that. But now I accept that social science, but then social scientists, so-called social scientists, should also know science. They also need to learn that there is really a physical and there is a biological basis of what we are. And then you can evaluate what is the Indian system of life, whether it's village or the family or the husband, wife, or the children, what kind of system that they can have. People here now in the West talking about social therapy. Where you are, when you are sick and you're having some problems, chronic problems, you may be prescribed to go see your mother for 3 weeks. That may be actually happening. And that's something that is Indian. Now, other thing is that do unto others written into our genes. This is a publication that came out in 2007. This is not exactly the publication. This is a report of the publication, New York Times, that they talk about that, taking care of others, being empathetic to others is in our genes. And that's related to some study that happened in 7 years later. And there are more studies that I said is happening right now. I work with this Clostridium botulinum, and it has evolved over. It started when there was no air, there was no oxygen. Air was there was no oxygen, and it has 15,000 higher fold higher generation than a human being. So this has evolved over a period of time. And anyway, I just wanted to give that idea that even E. coli, which sometimes people think is a problem, but a lot of times actually is in our body and helps us, 88,000 fold higher generation. And so these are our ancestors, and they take care of, there are more E. coli cells, or bacterial cells, I should say, in our body than our own cells. We have about 40 trillion cells, and we have 100 trillion bacteria in our body. If bacteria decides one day to leave, by the way, viruses also, there are hundreds of trillions of viruses in our body also. It's just not the corona is not here. But the point is that these are our ancestors. One day they decide to leave, we will not be existing. The creation of ethos, now talking about what do we do if democracy is not the way to do it, because it messes up everything, it messes up economy, it messes up society. Then what do we do? So we create decentralization, leave to the regions of task of governance and governance of even health. Ayurveda says that everything that if you get a disease, the medicine is locally available in the plants, and there is a theory and there is good science behind that. Personalized virtue, a king must study the arts of man making. It should be that high. Self-reliance, of course, we are talking about self-reliance. So society to have right to create it. Those who contribute to society have the right to create it. So it should be from there, bottoms up, and with that kind of ideas. And the task of spies must be to go among the people, not sitting on the computers and doing all kind of equations and algorithms. And equality, all are held accountable equally. That's what is called equality. I've been doing some survey, equality versus equality, equitability versus equality. I've been doing some survey, just informal survey, asking people whether as a mother or as a father or as a professor, what do they think their right is more important or responsibilities? And I have heard either same or more responsibilities. But you have never seen a protest around cities or anywhere where people are protesting that they need to get their responsibilities. Everybody only protests for rights. There's something wrong. So we need to think about freedom of, from, and to. That we need to understand. Then only we can create the system. These ideas are the ideas of Mahatma Gandhi. These are not my ideas. These are Mahatma Gandhi and Jayaprakash Narayan. Both of them had so much role to play in Indian society. And I would just want to maybe finish with this last part of my presentation. Will take in just a few minutes. Is that this is a Vedic view. This is compatible with Vedic view, in which you have Vedic society that was created as a praja. And it has a Varna Vyavastha, and I know a lot of people don't like it because they don't understand, or they don't want to practice it because they're so much enamored by the system that I told earlier that has been in practice at least for the last few hundred years. Silpkar, actually the word silp, I wouldn't go into detail, but at least you can see it. These are the architect and artifiers, but silp is actually more encompassing than just this. And I can tell you one thing, that anything that happens from birth to death, including marriage, in the villages, these people, the Lohar, Kumhar, Badhai, they have a huge role to play. They actually come to bless people, the couples, because they are the people who are in that situation to do that, and they have an influence of that kind. Rather than what we have in OBC, ST, all this division of considered Sudras are considered somehow lowest and Brahmins are considered somehow highest. It is not something that was created in the Vedic society. It's not like that. Or I give you one example of my little reading of Sanskrit, which unfortunately with 17 universities in India on Sanskrit, not a single report has been on this. Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasa, this is clear. the 4 varnas were created by me, means, Bhagavan Krishna is saying this in the Bhagavad Gita, based on your gunas and karmas. But the line that, is in chapter 18, where it describes what Sudra is, it describes what Brahmin is, describes what Kshatriya is, describes what Vaisya is. And then at the end, it says, Paricharyatmakam karma sudrasyapi swabhavajam. It says Paricharyatmak means to serve others, is the nature of Sudras. But it also says api, means also. It's a Sudra also has this nature, which means the Vaisya, the Kshatriya and Brahmin also have this. Their nature is to serve those who but most of the time, not all the time, any book that we have found so far only talks about the Sudras will be doing the service to others. That's not the case. Sudras also be doing the service to others. And Sudras, of course, includes me in it as a professor, and doctors and engineers and all the people that you can see. They are still in a much better shape. And the reason we call Swami Vivekananda said those people who do service and get payment for it, they are all Sudras. And that is true. And so I consider myself to be Sudra. I just need to be better one. And if you really look at that, these Sudras are the one who get to the Brahma, Prajapati. And many people, including right there, Vishwakarma last name, Prajapati last name. This is the concept that needs to be built up through education, through practice, through understanding, and should be the goal. And then only whatever we want to create at that point, we will be able to. But what we are doing, we have the economic, this in the middle, that says that there was a point around 1800 or 1790 or so, where India and China together were having about half of the GDP of the world. India was having about a third of it, of the world. But now, by the time we got independence, we were tiny. And even today, we are not a lot more than this. So this is an important aspect, that we were able to run the economy our way. And then we had the history of, most advanced society. But what is the focus on right now? We are trying to not build the villages. We are trying to make only cities, smart cities. And then, of course, thanks to Corona, that idea has been taken care. But ultimately, you have to do the economic activity. You have to use your culture to increase innate immunity, and that's part of the reason why Indians are recovering better, because I think they have innate immunity. And then ultimately this will go away. But the question is, what are we going to be after this? And this is an opportunity in my opinion, for next 9 to 12 months, where the Vedic perspective, if it is practiced not by just talking and claiming, but by practicing, this might be able to happen. And this is a story written by Ian Jack in The Guardian, who in 2018, I believe, where he said there are 600 million young people in India. They're going to change the world, and I hope that happens. And the change of the world may have, according to Yuga cycle. Again, I'm not going to go into detail, but according to my calculation, and Nilesh Oak, I just saw he joining, is that we are in the 4th stage of ascending Treta. This is according to Paramhans Yoganand's guru, Yukteswar Guru. He had talked about this cycle. So we are in the 4th charan of the ascending Treta, which means we have about 900 years to go when Satyajug will come. So this is a time to change according to these calculations also. And to do that, I think Ram's ideas and concepts and his behavior need to be looked at. I mean, most of you know it well. Only one point I want to make is that there was a Wall Street Journal did a survey of Indian versus Chinese entrepreneurs, and the first question was, why do you do this? And the Indians wanted to be their own boss, which means they want to be independent. They want to run things according to them, and they were inspired more by families compared to Chinese. And ultimately, they use their own jugaad compared to networking with the state the Chinese use. So I think this culture is still there, and that culture comes from this idea that whatever you say, that's what you do, and you consider others' welfare better than yours. I think those are the two ideas that comes in Ramraj, and if we are able to do that, I think we will go a long way. And there is no concept of right. I think I already mentioned. It's only concept of duty, and there is no word, actually, believe it or not, for the rights. There is no word in Hindi or in Sanskrit say adhikar. An adhikar word comes from adhikar. Adhi means more, kar means work. So you do the work and you get the benefit of whatever happens, that you accept that. There is no concept of God in India. It's concept of Ishvara, and that through yoga, going back to the yoga thing that I was talking about, through yoga only you can become Ishvara, because by practices of Patanjali Yoga Sutra just says that when you become away and you can get rid of your rag and dves and pap and punya, the whole idea of pap and punya, you're not affected by it, then you become Ishvara, and that you can practice that idea. And this is a very scientific idea. And the Indian Constitution, if there is one thing that is important in there, is that the Article 51A describes the fundamental duties. It shall be the duty of every citizen of India to develop the scientific temper. And what I'm talking about is the scientific temper. I hope I have been able to convince the scientific temper. If you look at Indian traditions from scientific perspective, and you will find that it is all in compliance. And so democracy divides, Prajatantra unites. And if we were able to do something like that, I think we will get somewhere. This is my last but probably one slide, where it kind of summarizes: to create harmony, knowledge, and satisfaction, which is what is important for life, you need to go through this concepts of Ayurveda, yoga, Indic tradition, Sanatan Dharma, which is based on sacrifice and selflessness. All these other things will be taken care. On the side, they will be taken care. If this inner circle is good, the goal this, the means this, and what we really need to do is the sacrifice and selflessness, and that will get us wherever we will get. And this is my last slide. There is a woman behind every successful man. This is very commonly said. There may be a man these days, of course, people are talking, there may be a man behind every successful woman. But there is always a mother behind every successful human being. And I think we need to celebrate that motherhood in a very proper way. And in today's world, when everybody is now sitting at home, education is starting more at home, the mothers have to elevate themselves. It's not anymore just enough to make some food and take care of them. You have to really educate them. And mothers used to be, are in Indian tradition considered as the first teachers. And I have learned that the first teachers, there is a label. The first teacher gives the education, so introduces the second teacher, which is father. And the father gives education and gives the third teacher, which is the guru. The second teacher finishes this when there is called Upanayan, or that thread ceremony. That is when this is done. And then Guru's ultimate goal is to introduce one human being to the Brahm, or this whole Brahman. And then only you can call yourself Aham Brahmasmi, because you need to get to that label. And Abraham Lincoln said, everything I am or ever hope to be, I owe to my angel mother. This is Abraham Lincoln, who is a great leader in America. And I can say a little bit about my mother, who happened to visit me in India, and in America, and I was able to do some service to her. And I dedicate my whole life and all the understanding and thinking about what I am today to my mother, not because this gave me birth, but I think I really learned from her, who was illiterate, by the way. Her behavior, her demeanor, her expectations, her silence, all that really has taught me so much, so that I can see the world in a different way. Thank you very much. I'm again very sorry to have taken a little bit more time than it was allotted to me, but I hope that there will be some questions, and I will be happy to answer them.
Yes, I have a comment and a question. So which should I give you first, a comment or the question?
Comment.
Okay, so regarding the comparison of the Christian Trinity with the three great gods of Hinduism, I don't think many Christians would agree with that, because the point is that the Christian Trinity actually is a product of two things. It is a product of Jewish Messianism, and it is also a product of Greek Platonism. So just comparing these two entities, just because there are three components to each one would be, rather simplistic. So that is my comment. The other question is, why should we, most of all, object when somebody says that yoga is an integral part of Hindu religion? I mean, regardless of the context, we have to accept that it is an integral part of, so many sampradayas, including Nastika sampradayas, which recognize some of its practices. And in fact, Buddha himself learned at the feet of yoga teachers before he went on his mission. So why should we even object to the fact that they are actually acknowledging our intellectual property? Because this is a problem elsewhere, because we are also complaining, at least part of our community is also complaining that, people are not giving due credit to Hinduism and Dharma in terms of its gift of yoga.
Sure, absolutely. Wonderful question and comment also. I think, of course, it is simplistic because it's just written in 2 slides. I do have a little bit more understanding, maybe not as much as many other people may have. The point is, I'm a practical person. Being a scientist, I normally bring it down to what really being practiced. I think there is no doubt that they have a great philosophy behind it, and like I said, that will be wonderful if everybody practices that. Same thing is true about Hindus also. We have great philosophy, but we don't practice it either. So it is my only purpose was to show that these two are there, and I wanted to say this in context of what you just asked the question. Why should we object to it? We don't object to it at all. I don't mean to be object that they consider this to be religion, but then also the same rule should be applied to theirs. See what I'm saying? That's the only thing. Now, the third point I want to make out of that, I started a course in the University of Massachusetts, the only course I believe so far, where yoga is taught as a science course. Actually, when I say science course, not that I teach as a science course, but university has accepted as a science course, because they meet the science requirement. Every student in my university is expected to have at least 3 credit course in science. And so my course on yoga was accepted as a science course. Now, again, coming from where I'm coming from, as more of an experimental scientist person, we know that there is a lot of conflict between religion and science historically. And so when I say about religion, I'm only from that perspective. So I like to consider yoga to be more scientific, not as a religious. That is not to say that it is not coming from Hindu, what we consider Hindu or Vedic. Of course, it's absolutely coming from. And I always start that. But the important thing for us to think is not just we get some currency, but we get equitable currency. If they are going to object to this as a religion, then whatever they consider as a religion also should be objected. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, religion, a concept, whether Hinduism is a religion, is also a acceptance of somebody else's definition. Because religion, from their thing, you have to have a God in there. That's why I try to say in yoga, this concept of Ishvara, which is translated as a God, but this is a very different concept. Ishvara is a very different concept than God. And that's why I said what I said. So it is more of an intellectual level discussion here. In practical sense, absolutely, if they should recognize that it comes from Hindus. And I'm very proud to say that, yoga is a concept that has been from Hindus. Of course, it starts from sun god and then comes to Krishna, and Krishna to Manu, and then the rest of the humanity. It's part of Hindu. There is no question about that, and I have no objection to that. So, I agree with you.
Myself, Rajkumar, I am assistant professor in Institute of Advanced Sciences and working mainly on protein structure, and my main research is right now towards neuronal regeneration and synaptic plasticity recovery. So with this brief introduction, I am also in charge of developing some educational program at Institute of Advanced Sciences. So me and Dr. Singh is continuously working on some pedagogical approaches, how to introduce different educational system than the current, whatever the current is. So my question is that you presented several texts from Vedic, and most of the time I heard about their literal meanings. but there are some hidden meaning and there is more explanation to that, and those are not very, as you said, not very much acceptable to most of the people. So what is preventing us to accept the other view, and how we can include that into our educational system? Why can't we say that Sudras are also important? Why we exclude them from our Varna system?
Yeah. I think there's of course very. I mean, we both work together, so we know. I understand where you're coming from. So I think, yeah. I mean, it is very difficult. Why we don't have all these things, knowledge available, and then explained properly. It's not a question of saying they are also. Actually, what I presented and what I see, they are the most important people. Sudras, so-called Sudras. How historically this has happened, I think we need to. I mean, that's part of this region. I'm comparing with the West because West had vested interest. All pun intended. West had vested interest in it because they wanted to control, and they have their culture comes from there. Again, this is not just a human being, because they don't have as much, and so they always look for somewhere where it is available. And so to rule India and Indian mind, even today intellectually, as you can even hear in some of the questions of the great scholars who are asking these questions, because it's still responding to them. We do not have our own. When we really have all the resources, I mean, this guy, Jack Iron, talking about 600 million youth, all we need to do is train them properly. And, I want to tell you just one incident, Rajkumar, about this. In 1998, I believe, when the Pokhran happened, Americans put sanctions on India, economic sanctions. 6 months later, I remember reports where Americans were approaching Indians to get their sanctions lifted. Why? Because they were suffering more. India is a perfect country of its own, because there are so many cultures, so many languages, so many types of food, so many types of products. So 95%, at least at that time, I read in the report, 95% of Indian economy is self-sufficient. And we don't consider the definition of what we are considering today, then it will be a very different. I didn't emphasize on this. It's like we have mental slavery. I briefly just had the slide, but I didn't discuss about this. Panchasila is a concept Jawaharlal Nehru started, or at least used in international arena. That you would imagine that, this is really Indian concept, but it is nothing. Nothing can be farther from truth. He did not use either. I mean, the only thing true was punch, and even punch can be different meaning. But there was no sila. Panch sila is the concept of Buddhism that really talks about great thing, that you do not have violence, you do not tell lies, and you do not hoard things, and things like of that nature. Basically it's the yamas in yoga. But there was nothing in that, but his name was used Panchsila, because we have this mental slavery that we have to somehow meet. We have to name ours. The more recent Prime Minister Modi, who I have great respect. I have a great respect for Jawaharlal Nehru also, first Prime Minister. I know a lot of people have differences, but I know somebody is a Prime Minister, and a lot of things I learned reading some of his biography. And so is Modi. I have great respect for him. But what is the first thing they did? They came. They have something called Niti Ayog. That was Yojana Ayog became Niti Ayog. Yojana Ayog, or at least it meant the same. Niti Ayog is National Institution for Transformation of India. We go and figure it out. How the hell they got this idea that now the Indian terms will be defined according to Western ideas. So this is a mental slavery, in my opinion. But I mean not in demeaning way. I don't mean in demeaning way. I just think that the situation of us has created to this. The situation, just like Western world has does whatever they do, based on my limited interaction with people of other shades in the Western world, who also happen to be Ayurveda type people and yoga type people, more intellectual, more people who are otherwise maybe in science and technology, where we do research. When I talk to them heart to heart, they have the same view as we. So the point is that, is there somebody who can learn it better, learn from our knowledgeable people in India? There are a lot of them, and then practice it and then present it. I think that's what is really missing.
You mentioned that in the University of Massachusetts, yoga has been recognized as a pure science field. So I wanted to understand more about it, or maybe a few references. I understand that given the limited time, we will not be able to cover much on this, but any references or literature which can be used as a starting point to understand the way how things are being structured there.
Yeah, so that was a very good question. Relatively simple for me to answer because I started that. I was the director of Center for Indic Studies in the university for 15 years. I was the founding director until I took retirement from there. And we offered a program, academic program, as part of our center, which is very unique because no other center had that and had proposed that. I, coming from sciences, had my interest in that aspect. And so we proposed maybe 10 courses or something of that nature. I don't remember exactly how many are being run right now because I'm not there. But one of them was called Science of Kriya Yoga. And that the Kriya Yoga was, I use it in not exactly just, of course, it is part of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, where they Tapa Swadhyaya Iswar Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. But also, there is some familiarity of Kriya Yoga here because of self-realization fellowship. But I used also from scientific point of view because Kriya Yoga means something that happens, whatever happens, and then we can see whether it's physiological or biological. And so we used it from that point of view and proposed it to meet the science requirement. Like I said, there is in the university, they have a requirement that every student must take a science course. So people take different kind of courses. There are science and environment, science and health. So I propose Science of Kriya Yoga as one of the courses that meet that science requirement. And it goes through committees, university committees and dean and provost and others. It went through that. And there is a syllabus. If you are interested, there is a syllabus that normally I give it to students. There is a syllabus that I normally gave it to the committee because committee needs to see how I'm meeting the science requirement, what sciences are being addressed into this. And I provided all that, and I will be so happy to share with anybody and everybody. And those of people who, none of the students have had this course. Those who are here, I can see some of the people who are listening to this, including Rajkumar, did not take that course. He did maybe take a class or so, or maybe sat in one of those classes. But I'm offering right now that course. I'm practicing that course. Not as of course part of that university. University runs its own every year. It runs once or sometimes maybe twice. But I have been offering as a practice online course because that was my course and my heart is in it. So I'm offering that course for biotechnology. So maybe you will be more interested in that. And to taking that course, I think there are about 4 or 5 people on this in the audience who are taking that course. And I'm teaching right now once a week because I'm just trying to practice how to teach it online. So far, comes out to be very well. And so I will be happy to talk about that. I think that course, yoga course, in general, I'm just using Kriya Yoga as a generic term for yoga, can be used to make scientists and the science much better. And the people in every field, whether it's computer science or biotechnology or environmental science or whatever, I think it can be associated and that will only help. So I will be more than happy to share with you. You contact me offline. I think Rahul, you has my email and other things, and I will be so happy to interact with you.